The notary stopped my first home purchase with 5 words: "You still have an unpaid loan." Moments later, I learned my parents had opened debt in my name and hidden it for years. The deal died before the ink touched paper. One sentence, flat and casual, and everything I'd been building toward started sliding backward. "You still have an unpaid loan. We can't proceed." I was sitting in a bright office with a pen in my hand, dressed for the kind of day people remember. My slacks were thrifted and still stiff from the dry cleaner. My button-up was the one I only wore when I wanted to feel like I belonged in rooms like that. I was supposed to be buying my first house. It wasn't some dream place out of a real estate ad. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, cheap laminate floors, a backyard with a cracked bird bath, and a fence leaning sideways like it knew something I didn't. But it was mine. My name on the deed. My hand on the key. No roommates, no landlord, no parents. That last part mattered most. My parents liked to dress up dysfunction in soft words. My mom used to say, "We don't do savings, we do faith." What she meant was debt, denial, and guilt with a smile. Bills got ignored until they turned red. By the time I was 17, utilities were already being opened in my name. The first time I asked why, she didn't look embarrassed. She just said, "We needed it." Then, because she always knew where to press, she added, "You know how hard it is raising 3 kids." As if my social security number had come with a credit limit attached. That was when I decided I was done becoming them. I left at 18. I rented rooms with locks that barely worked. I lived on canned beans, microwaved rice, and whatever was marked down at the grocery store. I took every underpaid job that didn't feel openly illegal. Every time I paid something on time, every time I walked away from something I couldn't afford, I told myself the same thing. This is the road out. This house, this slightly busted little bungalow, was supposed to be the exit ramp. So when the notary stopped mid-signature and said, "Hang on," I didn't panic. Not at first. I thought maybe I'd missed an initial. Something stupid, something fixable. Then she frowned at the screen. "There's a discrepancy." The room shifted. Jenna, my realtor, a woman with impossible white teeth, and the calm expression of someone paid to stay steady during other people's disasters, leaned forward. "What kind of discrepancy?" The notary clicked once, then twice. "It says there's a personal loan in Cam's name, $42,870, opened in 2019, delinquent last year but currently in good standing." For a second, I thought she was talking about someone else. Then the words settled one by one, like weight dropping into my chest. I stared at her. "I don't have a loan." The mortgage officer glanced at his monitor, then back at me. "It's showing up on the soft pull we ran this morning. Valley Pacific Lending. It's affecting your debt-to-income ratio. We can't close with this on your record." Can't close. 3 words, and suddenly the room felt too warm. My fingers went numb around the pen. They turned the monitor toward me. My name. My social security number. The balance. The monthly payment history. 2 missed payments in 2020. Then steady payments after that. All attached to an address I hadn't lived at since college. My parents' house. Everything in me went still. Not shock, recognition. Everyone in the room was looking at me now, and I could feel that awful shift when strangers stop seeing you as capable and start seeing you as a problem. I forced a smile that felt brittle enough to break. "That's not mine," I said. "I never applied for that." "Could be identity theft," Jenna said softly, and the sympathy in her voice made it worse. Made me feel 12 years old and cornered. "You should freeze your credit right away." I nodded because I needed my body to do something. They offered to reschedule. "Get it sorted out and we can resubmit," the mortgage officer said, but I was barely hearing him. I was out the door before anyone could say anything else. By the time I hit the parking lot, I was already dialing a credit bureau, sweat collecting under my shirt, my heart pounding hard enough to make my vision pulse. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but deep down, I knew. I knew what kind of people my parents were. I knew how easily my mom could smile while lying straight to your face. I knew the way my dad used to say, "We're family." Like that phrase erased every line a decent person was supposed to respect. I knew how often my mother had waved things off with, "It's just paperwork." Paperwork. That was always the word when they wanted something ugly to sound harmless. It mattered now. It mattered because someone who had once tucked me into bed and signed school forms and told me blood meant loyalty, had taken out a loan in my name, used my credit, used my future, and I didn't even know it existed until it put both hands around the one thing I'd spent my adult life trying to build. I spent the next 2 hours in the parking lot of the public library because I couldn't make myself go home. My laptop was open on the passenger seat, hot enough to sting my leg when I shifted it. I called every credit bureau I could think of. I froze everything. I disputed what I could. I wrote case numbers on the back of a fast food receipt because my hands were shaking too hard to keep anything straight. When I finally got through to Experian, the woman on the line sounded calm in that eerie customer service way. Polite, measured, untouched. She started asking the standard verification questions. Full name, date of birth, last 4 digits of your social security number. Then there was a pause. Not long. Just long enough to make the skin on the back of my neck tighten. And when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The pause on the line was small, but it changed everything. One beat of silence, and suddenly it felt like the truth was already in the room, just waiting for me to catch up. Then she asked, "Did you take out a loan through Valley Pacific Lending in July 2019? No, I said, flat enough to surprise myself. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Another pause. Papers shifting somewhere on her end, keys tapping. Then, in that same calm voice, "It was approved using your full identifying information. The application was submitted online. The address listed matches 1735 Pinehurst Avenue." My throat locked. That was my parents' house. I hadn't lived there since 2016. I hadn't gotten mail there, hadn't slept there, hadn't wanted anything tied to that address except distance. But there it was, attached to a loan with my name on it, like it had every right to be there. "Can you tell who signed for it?" I asked. "There's an e-signature on file," she said. "The IP address traces back to that residence. The email used was camwilsonfamily1@gmail.com. Is that your account?" The question hung there. "No," I whispered. And just like that, the whole thing stopped feeling vague. Stopped feeling like a clerical error or a mixed file or some bureaucratic nightmare that could be explained away. It had shape now, intent, a method, a Gmail account, a backup address, a little thing my mom had once mentioned in passing, smiling like she was being helpful. "I made that for you in case you ever needed a second email, in case college stuff got bounced, in case. At the time, it had seemed harmless, a little intrusive maybe, the kind of thing an over-involved mother did because she didn't understand boundaries and didn't care to learn them. Now I understood what it really was. Infrastructure. A ready-made mask with my name on it. The loan wasn't an accident. It wasn't desperation in the heat of the moment. It was built. Set up in pieces. Planned far enough in advance that they could slip it on like a second skin and use it without me noticing. And the worst part was how careful they'd been afterward, keeping it just current enough, just quiet enough, that it wouldn't flare up until the exact moment I had something to lose. I thanked the woman from Experian, hung up, and sat there with my phone in my hand until the screen went black. My coffee sat untouched in the cup holder, cooling beside me. I didn't move. Cam Wilson family. I could hear my mother saying it in my head with that same bright voice she used whenever she wanted credit for something no one had asked her to do. It should have made me angry first. That would have been easier. But rage wasn't the first thing that hit. Grief was. Because this wasn't a stranger who had stolen from me. This was the woman who used to pack peanut butter sandwiches in my lunch and tuck in little notes with hearts on them. This was the man who taught me to ride a bike by letting go too early, then laughing when I crashed and telling me I'd thank him later. This was family in the most dangerous sense of the word, the kind that teaches you to lower your guard before they use what's behind it. I was 28 years old, sitting alone in a parked car outside a public library, holding proof that the people who raised me had looked at my future and treated it like spare cash. I stared at my phone for a long time before I dialed. It rang 5 times, then she picked up. "Hey, sweetheart," my mom said, warm and easy, like she was answering from a kitchen full of light. "Honey, I was just thinking about you." Of course she was. I swallowed once. "Hey, Mom, can I ask you something weird?" "Sure," she said lightly. "What's up?" "There's a loan in my name, opened in 2019 through a company called Valley Pacific. Do you know anything about that?" The silence this time was sharper. Not confusion. Not surprise. Recognition. Then she moved too fast. "Oh, that," she said, and I could hear her trying to walk it back before she'd even finished the words. "No, no, of course not. We wouldn't, that's ridiculous. Are you sure it's not some kind of mistake?" My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice even. Casual, almost bored. "Well, the application was submitted from your address," I said. "And the email they used was Cam Wilson Family 1. The one you made a few years back, remember?" Nothing. Then a small, nervous laugh. Thin as tissue. I did make that years ago," she said. "But I didn't use it for anything. Maybe you signed up for something and forgot." "No," I said. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't argue. Just gave her the truth in the simplest form possible. "No, I didn't." She exhaled into the phone and I could hear the shift, the moment she understood denial wasn't going to carry her out of it. Her tone softened, but not in a way that made anything better. It turned coaxing. Familiar. Manipulative enough to feel rehearsed. "Cam, honey," she said, "is this really that big of a deal? You're doing so well now. You always said if you ever could, you'd help the family. And it's not like we missed payments." The words landed with surgical precision. I hadn't said anything about payments. Not one word. I went completely still. And in the silence that followed, I could feel her realizing what she'd just done. There was no way to unsay it. No way to crawl backward into innocence after that. She'd stepped right over the line herself. "Cam, wait," she said quickly. "I didn't mean it like—" I hung up. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the passenger seat. I just sat there staring through the windshield, like maybe if I looked hard enough, the world outside would rearrange itself into something I recognized. Some version of my life where this wasn't true, where I hadn't just heard my mother confess by accident. That version never showed up. The rage came then, but it didn't come loud. No shaking, no screaming, no dramatic breakdown. It came cold, focused, useful. They thought I'd do what I'd always done. Go quiet, absorb the damage, tell myself it wasn't worth the fight, and move on with one more private wound I'd never fully name. That was the role they'd written for me years ago. The reasonable one. The resilient one. The one who could be hurt and still be expected to keep the peace. But they had taken something that wasn't theirs. And this time, I wasn't going to smooth it over so they could sleep at night. People like to think betrayal announces itself. Thunder, shouting, a slammed door. It doesn't always. Sometimes it's a pattern you only recognize once you're far enough away to stop calling it normal. I went home and didn't turn on a single light. I dropped my keys by the door, opened my laptop, and started digging with the kind of focus that feels a little like blood loss. The old backup Gmail was still there. I hadn't touched it in years, but I knew exactly what the password would be. My childhood dog's name and my mother's birthday. She had always mistaken predictability for cleverness. The account opened on the first try, and there it was. Valley Pacific Loan Confirmation _07-2019. A PDF attachment. Then another email. Application approved. Another. Funds dispersed. My stomach turned as I opened them one by one. My name, my social security number, my parents' address, my mother's phone number listed as the secondary contact. Every page was neat, complete, official, like the system had accepted the lie because it had been fed every piece it needed. Then I opened the signed application, and halfway down the page under borrower information, I saw something that made my skin go cold. The proof didn't stop at one email. It kept unfolding, click after click, until revenge stopped sounding emotional and started sounding practical. What I was looking at wasn't panic. It was planning. I took screenshots first. Then I downloaded every PDF, every confirmation, every piece of proof, and saved it all to an encrypted drive I created for one reason only: to make sure they could never talk their way out of this later. There were payment receipts, confirmation emails from my mother's account to the loan portal, a recovery email tied back to her main inbox. I traced the earliest payment to a bank transfer with a memo line that read, CW42000 loan start. She hadn't even tried to hide it. That was the part that got under my skin. Not just that they'd done it, it was how normal it all looked in writing. Casual, administrative, like stealing from me had become a routine task. The paper trail was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't one reckless choice during some emergency. This was strategy, built on a simple assumption. I would never notice, never question, never say no. And for a long time, they were right. I closed the laptop and sat there in the dark, heart slamming against my ribs. Then I dragged out the file box from under my bed, the one labeled tax stuff. The label was a lie. It was mostly old bills, receipts, and the few documents I'd kept from a past I usually tried not to touch. Near the back was a yellow envelope. Inside was an overdue Comcast bill from when I was 16, $486.13. I stared at it until the memory came back sharp enough to sting. I'd come home from school and asked why the internet account was in my name. My mother had barely looked up. She gave me that soft, tired smile she used whenever she wanted something selfish to sound noble. "Oh, sweetheart, your credit's clean. Ours isn't. You'll understand when you're older." And just like that, I became the family safety net at 16. That was the first time they stole from me. And I let them. I let them again when I co-signed my brother's car loan because everybody swore he just needed one chance. He missed 3 payments, blamed the dealership, then acted offended when I asked questions. I paid it off because I was terrified of what it would do to my credit. I let them when my dad opened a retail card in my name and maxed it out buying a new refrigerator. "We needed it," he said. "You weren't using your limit anyway." Over the years, they called it survival. They called it family. They said we were a team. What they really meant was simpler. You take the hit, and we keep going. The pattern was obvious now. Every time I was careful, they treated it like a resource. Every time I was responsible, they translated it into access. They didn't admire my discipline. They fed on it. So when I emailed my lawyer the next morning, I didn't hesitate. Subject: urgent, financial identity misuse by family. Attachment: proof.zip. Daniel called the next day. His voice was measured. "Cam," he said, "this is serious." "No kidding. You have a strong identity fraud case. The IP address, the email trail, the payment history. This wasn't accidental. And because the account was maintained over time, it points to deliberate long-term misuse." I leaned back in my chair. "So what do we do?" He paused. "That depends on what you want. Do you want to press criminal charges?" The question sat there longer than it should have. Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to protect the last version of myself that still believed being decent meant staying soft. But that version of me had started dying the moment I saw that fake Gmail account. "What if I don't want jail?" I said slowly. "But I do want them to pay. Financially, publicly, legally." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Then we build pressure." I nodded. "Do it." We spent the next hour going through options: cease and desist letters, formal notice of intent to sue, credit disputes, locking down every point of access they might still have, civil damages, documentation. The language was dry, but something in me was changing while he spoke. Not breaking, clarifying. They had spent years treating me like a fallback plan with a pulse, a backup account, a number they could borrow against. Now they were going to learn what happened when the person who always cleaned up the mess stopped volunteering. 2 days later, the certified envelope went out. Inside was a letter on Daniel's official stationery demanding repayment of the $42,870 loan taken out in my name. It cited identity fraud, financial misuse, and breach of trust. It included screenshots, IP trace records, email history, and an itemized summary of the damage. And at the end, in language so clean it almost looked polite, it warned that if the debt was not repaid in full within 30 days, we would file a civil suit for damages, including emotional distress and the loss tied to the house their actions had cost me. It was the first thing I had ever sent my parents that required a signature. I froze my credit with every bureau and lender I could find. I changed banking passwords, moved everything to new two-factor authentication. I even changed my number, not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted control over what reached me and when. I combed through every leftover connection I could think of. The Netflix login my mother was still using, the old savings account I'd never closed, a car insurance policy where I was somehow still listed as part of their household. One by one, I erased the access, canceled it, closed it, cut it loose. I wasn't just separating from them. I was making sure they could never reach into my life and call it love again. And even while I was building those walls, the old ache kept rising anyway. They used to say it like it was praise. Cam's dependable. Cam's solid. What they meant was uglier. Cam will clean up the mess. Not this time. Not this time. Not with this version of me. For years, the role had been written in permanent ink. Cam won't say no. Cam will eat the loss and call it love. Every time they looked at me, they saw less a son than an emergency fund with a pulse. I kept thinking about Christmas 2017. Josh got a DUI and the whole family moved around him like he was the one who'd been wronged. My dad let it slip over dinner that I had money saved from freelance work. He said it casually like he was proud of me right before he used it against me. "You don't even have a family to take care of," he'd said. "You're single, no kids. Your brother needs help." So I paid the retainer, $4,500 to a lawyer for a problem I didn't create. Josh never even sent a thank you text. Now they were finally going to feel what that was like. I didn't want revenge in the dramatic sense. I wanted something colder. I wanted them sitting at their kitchen table staring at a bill they couldn't guilt, charm, or ignore into disappearing. I wanted them to know it landed there because I sent it. Then my mother left the voicemail. It came in at 11:30 p.m. I was in bed listening to rain tap the windows when my phone lit up. Voicemail from Mom. For a second I thought about deleting it unheard, but curiosity has always been one of the ways they get back in. So I listened. Her voice came through small, but not sorry. Just tired in that performative way she used when she wanted to sound wounded enough that nobody would ask questions. "Cam, I got your letter. I don't even know what to say. I mean, yes, okay, we made a mistake, but we're your parents. We raised you, fed you, gave you everything. And now you're threatening to sue us over what? Some loan you weren't even using?" My jaw locked. Then she kept going. "I just don't understand who you've become. This isn't you. You used to care about family. What happened to that boy?" She paused there like she was making room for shame. Then came the sigh. "I hope you come to your senses. We are not the bad guys here. We just needed help. You knew that. You always did." Click. That was it. No ownership, no apology. Just manipulation dressed up as disappointment. Every line was designed to pull me back into the role. Good son. Soft target, available resource. I sat there in the dark with the phone in my hand and understood something so clearly it almost calmed me. They had never really seen me. They saw what I could absorb. That voicemail wasn't a plea for understanding. It was a dare. She was betting I would hear her voice crack, remember childhood, and fold. I didn't share it right away. I sat on it for 2 days, not because I was protecting her, but because I still wasn't sure I wanted to drag anyone else into this. Then Emma texted, "Hey, got a weird call from Aunt Lisa. She said you're trying to destroy the family. You okay?" I stared at the message. I hadn't talked to Emma in months, but she'd always been one of the few people in that family who saw things clearly. When we were kids, she once told me, "Your mom guilt trips like it's a sport." She wasn't wrong. I called her. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, mind if I send you something?" I asked. "A beat. Then, should I get popcorn?" "Probably." I sent her the voicemail. No edits, no commentary. Just the file. She listened in silence. When it ended, she didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she exhaled. "She really said all that in one shot?" "She did." "And she's mad at you for being cold?" "Yep." Jesus. Later that night, she texted again. "Mom's already calling people. She told the family thread you hacked her email and you're threatening legal action just to humiliate them." There it was. The rewrite. The second my mother felt control slipping, she did what she always did. She edited the story until she looked wounded, and everyone else looked cruel. I could picture the message in the Wilson family chat without even seeing it. Tearful emojis. Half-truths. We just needed help. He turned on us. You know how Cam is. He's always been sensitive. I didn't need to read it. I knew the rhythm by heart. But this time, I had something better than an explanation. I had receipts. Daniel and I had already put together a chronological file documenting every known instance of identity misuse, financial coercion, and manipulation we could verify going back a decade. We called it the truth packet. Dates, screenshots, bills, email records, loan details, the Comcast account from when I was 16, the car loan, the retail card, the Valley Pacific application. Everything clean, ordered, and impossible to wave away as a misunderstanding. It wasn't built to humiliate them. It was built to protect me. I uploaded it to a private drive and wrote one message. Hi. Since some of you are being pulled into a version of this story that has been heavily revised, here are the facts. I won't be arguing in the group chat or defending myself on calls. But if you want to know what actually happened, it's all here. Read it or don't, your choice. Just don't pretend you weren't told. I didn't send it to everyone, just the people whose judgment I trusted, Emma, Uncle Ray, my cousin Jordan, and Aunt Mel, who once told me she should have left the family years ago, but it was too messy to even start unpacking. Well, this was the unpacking. Within 24 hours, things got loud. Emma texted first. "Mom is furious. She read the file. She says your mother is lying and dragging everybody else down with her. Also, holy hell, that Comcast bill from when you were 16. Then Jordan. "Bro, I remember the car loan. Your dad literally said, 'Cam's got it,' like it was nothing." "I'm sorry, man." Then Aunt Mel. "I believe you. I've seen this pattern for years. They did it to your grandfather, too. I just didn't know it went this far." I read that message twice. Not because I was shocked, because suddenly the floor under the story shifted again. This wasn't just theft, it was inheritance. Once I saw the pattern, they got more dangerous. Not because they changed, but because I finally understood how far they were willing to go once control started slipping. And the second the story stopped obeying them, my mother did what she always did. She reached for the audience. The group text hit all at once. Me, Josh, my sister, my parents. No greeting, no pretense. "Mom, if you think airing dirty laundry makes you look good, think again. Family is about forgiveness. You are turning this into a war. And for what? A few dollars. A few dollars." I stared at the screen long enough for the words to go blurry, then sent exactly one thing back. A screenshot of the loan disbursement confirmation. $42,870. Under it, I typed one line. It wasn't a few dollars to me. It was my life. Then I left the chat before anyone could start rearranging the truth in real time. The next move came fast. A thick envelope was waiting under my apartment door, shoved halfway onto the mat by the mail carrier who never knocked. Official return address. Heavy paper. The kind of letter that already feels invasive before you open it. Inside was a courtesy notice from Valley Bank. I'd been listed as a financial stakeholder on a new home equity line of credit application pending approval. Property address, 1735 Pinehurst Avenue. My parents' house. I read it twice because the first time didn't fully land. Then I saw the language they'd used to justify attaching me. Prior financial contribution establishing equitable interest. I knew exactly what they meant. Back in 2015, when I was 19 and still stupid enough to mistake sacrifice for love, I'd given them $8,000 to help with the down payment on that house. They'd framed it like a family milestone, like I was part of something meaningful. Afterward, they barely mentioned it again unless they needed proof of what a good son I'd been. Now they were trying to use that same contribution to argue I was tied to the property, just enough apparently to drag my name into another loan and lean on my credit history one more time. It was almost elegant in a sick way. If they couldn't keep stealing from my future quietly, they'd try to bind me to their present in public. I scanned the letter and sent it straight to Daniel. He replied 4 words later. We are freezing the asset. Within 72 hours, he had filed a temporary lien against the property tied to pending litigation involving identity misuse and financial fraud. Clean, aggressive, hard to ignore. The bank backed off. The HELOC application died before it could close. For a few hours, that felt like breathing. But people like my parents don't believe in consequences. They believe in appearances. They believe that if they can cry convincingly enough, stall long enough, call enough relatives, reality will get embarrassed and leave the room. 3 days later, Josh texted. Josh, hey man, we're all getting together Saturday. Mom wants to talk. Don't be dramatic. Just come. That word, dramatic, always made my skin tighten. In my family, it meant inconveniently honest. It meant stop naming the thing everyone else is working so hard to blur. I almost ignored him. Then I thought about the courtesy notice, the HELOC, the group text, the voicemail. The way they kept acting like this was still a misunderstanding they could manage if they got me in the right room and applied enough pressure. So I answered. I'll be there. Bring everyone. I've got something to show you. Saturday came in hard and gray, the kind of day that makes every house look a little harsher than it really is. Their living room was already staged when I walked in. My dad was standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed so tightly it looked painful. My mother was on the couch with tissues in her lap, already dabbing at dry eyes. Josh leaned against the wall, trying on neutrality like it might save him. Even Aunt Lisa was there, sipping iced tea and pretending she wasn't one of the family's most efficient rumor delivery systems. The whole thing had the feel of an intervention, except nobody in that room had ever once intervened for my benefit. Cam, my mom started, voice trembling on cue. We're worried about you. This isn't who you are. No, I said, setting my bag on the coffee table and unzipping it. This is exactly who I am now. I handed each of them a manila folder, not summaries, not selective pages, the full truth packet, financial records, screenshots, identity verification reports, IP traces, loan statements, dates, names, the old Comcast account, the retail card, the car loan history, the Valley Pacific file, the HELOC notice, the lien filing. Everything Daniel and I had built into a timeline so clean it was almost brutal. Paper has a way of draining the romance out of abuse. They flipped pages. The room went quiet except for the dry rasp of folders opening and closing. This, I said, is what you did. This is not drama. It's documentation. My mother scanned the first page and immediately started shaking her head. Cam, this doesn't prove what you think it proves. It looks worse than it is. You stole from me. I said it flat. No emphasis, no shaking voice. Just the sentence itself dropped clean between us. My dad finally stepped in. We didn't steal. We borrowed. You're acting like we're criminals. I looked at him. Really looked. At the confidence, the resentment, the absolute conviction that intent mattered more than impact as long as he was the one defining both. No, I said. Criminals face consequences. You haven't faced any yet. That landed. The room went so still I could hear the ice shift in Aunt Lisa's glass. Josh cleared his throat. Look, maybe things got messy, but airing this out like a lawsuit? Man, that's low. I turned to him. You're in 3 of those documents, by the way. The missed payments on the car loan, the account you let Mom pretend was yours for 2 years. That's all in there too. He flinched, small but real. My mother leaned forward, tissues crumpling in her hands. We are family. This can't be solved with lawyers. No, I said, but it can be started with them. I pulled one last folder from my bag and placed it on the table without sliding it toward anyone. This is the summary of the claims I'm prepared to file if repayment isn't arranged by next week. Full loan damages, legal fees, identity remediation costs. If you want to resolve this privately, I'm willing to negotiate through a mediator. If I don't hear from one by Friday, the courts will. They stared at me like I'd become someone else. Maybe I had, because for the first time in my life I wasn't shrinking to make them feel bigger. I wasn't softening the edges so they could keep pretending there weren't any. I didn't come here to fight, I said quietly. I came here to deliver a message. Nobody moved, so I gave them the only sentence that mattered. You do not get to steal from me and still call it love. Then I walked out. No cleanup, no apology, no staying behind to absorb the fallout. Just the sound of the front door shutting hard enough to mean something. Daniel called the following Wednesday. His voice was tighter than usual. I just got a call from someone who says they know you, he said. Emma gave them my number. The name hit before the meaning did. One second I was listening to Daniel, and the next I was standing in my kitchen with my grip tightening around the phone like it might keep the room from shifting. Who? She said her name is Brianna, Daniel said. Your brother's ex, I think. She wants to talk. And Cam, you're going to want to hear this. I froze. Brianna? Josh's girlfriend? Or ex? It was always hard to tell. She was the one who used to sit through family dinners with that careful, distant expression. Once, after one of my mother's guilt trips, she caught me alone in the kitchen and said, You know you don't belong here, right? Not mean, almost kind. I met her the next afternoon at a diner halfway between her new apartment and my side of town. She looked sharper, more tired, like somebody who had stopped pretending the mess around her was temporary. We skipped the pleasantries. I'm not here to stir anything up, she said. Emma showed me some of the file. I saw enough to know you still don't have the whole story. Every muscle in my body tightened. Then tell me. She nodded once. Josh didn't just benefit from the Valley Pacific loan. He was the reason for it. I stared at her. That $42,870, she said. It didn't go to your parents' bills. It wasn't for repairs. It wasn't a family emergency. Something cold moved through me. Then what was it for? She leaned in. It paid off Josh's gambling debt. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My brother doesn't gamble. Brianna gave me a tired look. He did. Sports betting first, then cards, then private cash games with people he should have stayed away from. By 2019, he owed almost 50 grand. The numbers lined up so cleanly it made me feel sick. There was a guy, she said. Vincent, not a bank. Not somebody you miss payments with and get polite reminders from. Josh was scared. Your mom found out. She panicked. Your dad said they couldn't put anything else in their own names, so they used yours. My mouth went dry. They took out the loan, paid the guy off, and made the monthly payments themselves, so it wouldn't blow back too fast. That was the plan. The diner disappeared around me. There was only that sentence repeating in my head. They used yours. I swallowed. How do you know this? Because I was there for the fallout, she said. The fights. Josh losing it. Your mom crying. Your dad yelling that if this got out, it would ruin the family. Of course that was the fear. Not what they'd done. Not me. The story. I told Josh he needed to tell you, Brianna said. He laughed. She stopped there, but I already knew the next part would hurt. He said Cam will never find out. Cam doesn't ask questions. He just fixes things. That landed deeper than the loan. Because it was true, because it was true. That was the part that finished it. Not the debt, not even the lie. The certainty underneath both of them, that my own brother could look at what they'd built on top of me and assume I'd do what I always did, carry it without complaint. After Brianna told me where the money had really gone, Everything moved fast. Daniel added Josh. My mother called until the screen looked bruised with missed notifications. I ignored everyone. By the night before the hearing, I was standing barefoot in the bungalow that should have been mine, walking through empty rooms with that new truth still scraping at the inside of me. A small life, built clean, earned honestly. That was what the house represented. Not luxury, not status. Just a place no one had cheated their way into. A kitchen where nothing came with strings. A bedroom that didn't feel borrowed. A desk by the window where I could sit down at the end of the day and know every inch of the life around me belonged to me because I had paid for it myself. The last time I'd stood in that house, I thought I was grieving the loss of it. Now I knew better. What I lost wasn't the house. It was the illusion that I had ever been safe inside my own family. That was gone now, burned off. And standing there in those quiet rooms, I realized I didn't miss it. I missed the person I had to be in order to believe it. The next morning, I wore black to court. Not for drama, not to make a point. Just because it felt clean. Simple. Quiet. Like I didn't owe anyone softness anymore. I saw my parents in the hallway before the hearing. My mother looked smaller than usual, but only in the way people do when the room finally stops cooperating with them. My father had that familiar set to his jaw, like he still believed indignation could pass for innocence if he wore it hard enough. Josh stood a little apart from them, glaring at me with the same stupid outrage he used to wear when he got caught taking things that weren't his. I didn't look at any of them for long, didn't nod, didn't speak. For once, I wasn't there to manage the temperature of the room. The hearing itself was procedural, dry, almost boring on the surface. The judge reviewed the evidence, the timeline, the identity verification, the loan records, the payment trail, the digital signatures, the history Daniel and I had laid out so carefully it was impossible to mistake the pattern for bad luck. Daniel did most of the talking. Measured, clean, no flourish, no moral speeches. Just facts, each one placed where it belonged. I sat with my hands folded and listened to my life get translated into bureaucratic language. Comcast account at 16. Unauthorized retail credit, misapplied co-signing, fraudulent personal loan, attempted HELOC attachment. It was all there. Every private humiliation I had spent years minimizing was suddenly being read back in a room where nobody cared about family mythology. Only documentation. Only sequence. Only proof. That was the strangest part. Once the story lost its emotional fog, it looked exactly like what it had always been. The judge didn't take long. The motion was approved. My family was ordered to repay the full loan amount, plus interest, plus $12,000 in damages tied to the financial harm and the collapsed home purchase. Josh was held individually liable on an additional fraud count, with separate civil penalties still pending. The related incidents would be removed from my credit record. A formal record would remain on file for future protection. Just like that, it was done. No swelling music, no cinematic collapse, no dramatic confession from the gallery. Just consequences, finally arriving in the language people like my parents could never sweet-talk. I didn't stay to watch them leave. I walked out of the courthouse, stood on the steps in the cold for a minute, and let the air hit my face. It didn't feel triumphant. That wasn't the word for it. It felt quiet, like a lock turning. Later that week, I got a handwritten letter from my father. The envelope was thick, the penmanship instantly familiar. It sat on my kitchen counter for an hour before I opened it, like some part of me already knew what would be inside and wanted to postpone the old reflex, the one that still braced before hearing his version of events. 2 pages. No real apology. Just the same rot in a different arrangement. I didn't know what else to do. We thought you'd be okay. You're always okay. We never expected you to turn against us like this. Then the line that stayed with me longest, because it said more than he meant it to. I guess you're not our Cam anymore. At the bottom, in darker ink, like he'd pressed harder for the last blow. You won. Hope it was worth it. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and set it down on the table. And I smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was finally honest. That was how he saw me. Not as a son, not even as a person, really. as something they had once counted on and no longer owned. Our Cam. The phrasing did all the work for him. He didn't miss me, he missed access. So I got up, pulled out a fresh envelope, and mailed something back to Pinehurst Avenue. No long response. No speech. No attempt to translate the truth into a language he could tolerate. Inside, I put a single printed photo. Me standing in front of the bungalow. The sold sign behind me. And beneath it, at the bottom of the page, a small note.